So, just made it. Sometimes it's easier than others to get out and get a little coffee. But sometimes you get there just as they're about to close and you apologize and you're sorry because you tried to get there before then. But sometimes you get there when you get there. And that's all you can do. But I tell you what, it's okay, because thankfully, at some of the places I get my coffees, they're kind enough to be ready for you, whether you're the first one to get there or the last. And that's important to know, because no matter if you are the first customer of the day or whether you're the last customer of the day, they have to still be able to serve you, and they have to be able to get you what you need. Because, I mean, let's face it, guys. Let's say you were going to have McDonald's for supper, but your mom or your dad didn't get there until all the way until they were about to close. And I know that's a late supper time, but seriously, let's say McDonald's closed at 5 o'clock and you had to get your Happy Meal before then, and you get there at 4:59. They still, if the door was open, would have to get you what you needed. And that's because any good business, any good person has to treat the customer at the end of the day and the customer at the beginning of the day the same. We have a gospel reading this week from the book of Matthew, 20th chapter, and it talks about just that. It talks about the fact that only the other way around. Instead of being people that were getting service, it was people working. It talks about God, the kingdom of heaven, and the place where God is in charge of being just like a vineyard, which is where grapes come from, a place where vines grow and grapes are. And in that vineyard, the people who work the vineyard were usually hired on the day. It wasn't like you had a contract and you just came to work every day 9 to 5 like some people do. You'd have to actually go out into the marketplace, and then the guy who owned the vineyard would come around and say, okay, you, and you, and then you would go work for the day. So in this story, he hires people right at the beginning of the day. He hires people at lunchtime. He hires people at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He even hires people right at 5 o'clock in the evening, and they only had an hour left to work. And in the midst of all of that, he treats them all the same. With each person, he says, and I'm going to pay you the day's wages. Now, a lot of people would think that's unfair because, well, what about the guys at the beginning of the day? Shouldn't they get more? They were there the whole day. And you know what? That's what those guys complained about. But you know what? Just because they worked through the scorching heat of the day, can you tell me that the people at the beginning of the day worked harder? What if they took breaks? What if the people at the beginning of the day worked for an hour and then took a coffee break, and then they took another coffee break and a half an hour later, and then they took a 2-hour lunch? Well, they didn't work that much more, did they? Or what if the guys who showed up an hour before everything was about to stop worked their hardest? What if they worked like 3 hours worth of work in 1 hour? What if they were quick? What if they were better than the other guys? You don't know. And you also don't know the circumstances. Like, remember when I said just a minute ago that what if you got to McDonald's and it was about to close and you weren't going to get your Happy Meal or whatever, and they had to serve you anyway? It's a bit inconvenient, to be that last person in the shop because they're trying to close up. But you know what? What if you had a good reason for being late? What if you were just coming from hospital visiting somebody who was sick, and this was the last thing you had to do before you got home? Or what if the person early in the morning got there to get their McDonald's or their coffee or whatever have you, and when they did, what if they were in a rush, and that's just how their lives work? They're busy, 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 so they only have one time to do it. We don't always understand somebody's reasons for doing what they do. We don't always understand their story. And for that very same reason, God has a lot of grace. In the story of the vineyard, it says the owner of the vineyard said, I can do what I like with the money I have. I can give as I like because I am generous. Please take what you're owed and be happy, be thankful, because it is what you are owed and what you are due for the work that we agreed upon. In a similar way, the way we live our lives, we can't always look at each other and say, I'm better or worse. You can't look at one person who is late and say, well, they're a worse person. You can't look at somebody who is early and say they're obviously better. Sometimes this is just the way that we live our lives. Sometimes this is just the way things are. We don't know what's in the background of our stories. And because of that blessing, God looks at each of us, no matter where we are, and treats us the same. I'll give you a great example. We've had 2 baptisms these past 2 weeks, one last week and one this week. And in both of those cases, we had babies to baptize. Now, let me ask you a question. Most of you probably were baptized as babies, but listen up. What if we baptized a 60-year-old too? What if some person who had never been baptized before came to church and wanted to be baptized as an adult? Does that mean they're going to be treated any differently than the baby? Maybe. They've seen a lot of different things. They've known a lot of different things. Any of you who have been baptized as little ones, you guys are blessed because you had God with you the whole time. You were blessed because your families were surrounding you with knowledge and prayers and all that stuff about church. You probably got to know your church very well. But some people are a bit later to the party. Does that mean we have to treat them as less? As less than? No. It just means they got there a little bit later. That's all. So like the vineyard owner treated all of his workers the same, because he chose to be fair to all of them, regardless of their story, we should always keep in mind that no matter how late we may be or how early, we each have the right to be treated equally and fair, as God treats us the same, by His grace, His love, and His generosity. So anyway, I'm going to enjoy my coffee now. It's one of them pumpkin spice ones. Shh, don't tell my wife. She'll want one too. Anyway, God bless, guys. Stay safe and pray safe. And I'll talk to you soon.